Class conflict. Before I begin the discussion of the theory of class conflict, I must define the terms bourgeoisie and the proletariat. In Marxist theory, the bourgeoisie are people who own the means of production. They pay proletarians to operate the means of production. These people are also called capitalists, and they steal the labor value of a worker to obtain money. The proletariat is the working class, the average worker. This is what most would consider to be the middle or low class. The proletariat generates all wealth. We operate the sweatshops, the gas stations, the industry. The bourgeoisie lack the labor, but they have the means of production. The means of production are the tools and land necessary to create a product. For example, to sell wood, you need the land for trees, saws for cutting them down, and ships for distribution. These are the means of production, owned by capitalists, used by the proletariat. A worker trades labor for money, however this is an inherently unequal exchange. A worker must be given less than they earn for a company, otherwise a company wouldn't see continual growth. To stay competitive, a company must always see continual growth, requiring the exploitation of workers. These are the real divisors of our society. It shows the legitimate and meaningful material conditions of someone. Do they manage the companies, or are they workers? One of the core components of Marxism is class conflict, the belief that the ruling and working class are contradictory. The interests of the working and ruling class are inherently opposed, creating consistent conflict requiring consistent suppression, oppression, and subjugation. The bourgeoisie employ the proletariat. Their goal is to maximize their share of the wealth the worker generates. The proletarian's goal is to keep as much of our share of the money we generate. Proletarians will eventually realize their unified goal of raising wages and increasing safety, creating unions, which become hotbeds of radical thinking. Workers will realize that they truly hold all the bargaining power in the boss-worker relationship, and once they realize we have all the bargaining power, we win. Wages will increase, safety regulations will be established, and we will get more vacations and breaks. Some proletarians will think of an idea that will resonate with these workers: socialism. Eventually, because of the conditions capitalism creates, an opposing socialist-like ideology will arise which will unite the proletarians to an ideology that promises they receive all of the value of their labor. The capitalists will have capitalism, the proletarians will have socialism. The Second Age of Enlightenment, where proletarians stop dividing along racial lines, and begin to realize the common enemy of all workers of the world, the obscenely wealthy. With this enlightenment, called class consciousness, the modern left is born, centered around the dream of revolutionary freedom and true democracy. As socialism speaks to the most oppressed groups of society, immigrants, non-whites, queers, etc., and promises a world of freedom from exploitation and hatred, it becomes popular within such oppressed groups. Workers hold all true power, our unions will win the fight. Workers will be granted rights, and a more anti-imperialist and anti-capitalist society will be created, but ultimately the ruling class remains the ruling class. Reactionaries and nationalists, spurred on by a necessity for a distraction from the depressing life workers face under capitalism, and bigots, created by fear of the unknown, and spurred on by capitalists looking for a pro-capitalist proletariat, will create the modern right wing. Liberalism is support for the status quo, and the status quo is a society that slowly progresses. Conservatism is support for the regression of society, to halt and reverse liberal progression. In especially desperate times, such as those faced by Germans in the Weimar Republic or Russians in Tsarist Russia, communists will start to gain serious power. Communists gaining power means that capitalism is at threat, which would likely mean the execution of the bourgeoisie, or at least severe downgrade in their obscenely high living conditions. And how could they possibly live without their private jet and yacht? Fly commercial? Preposterous. They fund and promote this nationalism, bigotry, need for a scapegoat, and reactionary sentiment, combining to form a new ideology, fascism. Capitalism necessitates boom and bust cycles, and when the markets are free and a large bust occurs, extreme wealth inequality and poverty rises. During these times, communists gain power, and the bourgeoisie gets scared. They get the reactionary far-right mad about some scapegoat, and fascism will eventually spread. The bourgeoisie, who may not personally believe in fascism, recognize it's the economic interest of the rich to establish fascism, will fund and promote fascists. Thus is the eventual conclusion of capitalism: class struggle, wealth inequality, fascism, and war. As shown before, bigotry and aggressive individuality are in the best interest of the rich, naturally concluding that anti-bigotry, empathy, and unity are in the working class best interest. Some question how bigotry is profitable. To that I'd remind that bigotry makes dehumanization easier, which makes imperialism and execution of political rivals easier. More bigotry means less pushback, means less propaganda necessary to quiet anti-imperialists, means less money spent. This all means bigotry is good for profits. It's also good for security. Building up bigotry is better done as a slow burn, something the mainstream doesn't realize is becoming a problem until it is one. For example, it is a well-known policy of the U.S. Democratic Party to fund far-right bigots like Trump to win the Republican candidacy. Because it forces leftists and other uninterested people to vote for them as the lesser of two evils. Because, remember, fascism is used as a last-ditch effort by capitalism to ensure its safety, and it's better to have your backups ready decades in advance rather than when it's needed. I will remind you what we are talking about. Fascism, a system created by capitalism during a time of extreme hardship where capitalism could be overthrown, in which a ultranationalist, bigoted, and hateful group persecute either one or many minorities which they believe to be the reason capitalism is failing. Not that capitalism contains contradictions that ensures generational wealth inequality. The bourgeoisie are not the first, but, if we win, they will be the last. What I mean is there have always been rulers and the ruled. We are divided and manipulated by the powerful. We are played like puppets. Every word of this has to be permitted by the rich to be shown. They tell the lie of free speech as though it were the truth. Before the capitalists there were the clergy and monarchy. Through revolts such as the American or French revolutions we overthrew these tyrants. During their system of feudalism and briefly an early capitalistic economy, there was no guarantee, expectation, or possibility of ascending to elitist ranks. They were granted by birthright. This system is inherently unfair, so this ended with gallows and heads in baskets. Capitalism allows for the possibility and so the expectation of the ability to ascend to elitist ranks, this being called economic mobility. Through tribalism to feudalism, and through feudalism to capitalism, history tends towards the system of highest socio-economic mobility. From capitalism to socialism, and from socialism to communism, does this principle dictate. Under capitalism the elite are the bourgeoisie and politicians, who work together to maintain the system. However, these positions are still granted mostly by birthright through nepotism, social mobility being possible but exceedingly rare. For this reason, the system must fall. The chronicle of history is soaked in the blood of the elite. We shall leave the last but deepest stain. Socialists want to put an end to the cycle. We want to remove the cowardly elite. We will loot and burn their houses, arrest them and other beneficiaries, and seize their land. We will not rest until Jeff Bezos is working among his former slaves. We have nothing to lose but ourselves. Furthermore, capitalism is centered around the infinite growth of a finite system. When your economic system is centered around infinite growth in a finite system, it creates scarcity. Scarcity raises prices to an unaffordable point, and if this scarcity is regular in daily life, this will throw the proletariat into crisis. Due to this inherent contradiction, capitalism necessitates an eventual crisis in every market due to its incessant need for growth. When these markets start to fail, capitalism is in decay. When capitalism begins to decay, the people suffer tremendously. When the people suffer, they begin to gain class consciousness, and when the people gain class consciousness, the ruling class feels threatened. The ruling class will begin to look for a scapegoat, some innocent group to blame for the crisis. They fund fascists to genocide leftists, resetting class consciousness. However, fascism is an inherently contradictory ideology as well. As humans, we have evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to have empathy, sympathy, and compassion. No matter how indoctrinated it is possible to become, you cannot overcome your own biological programming. Capitalism and fascism are snakes that eat their own tail, they go against innate human desires. The assertion that capitalism and fascism will naturally fall from inherent contradictions is not advocacy for complicity. They don't fall by themselves, we must hang capitalism. Historically, humans have always toppled their oppressive government. We, as people, tend towards empathy and a desire to not have a ruler. We, as much as any other person, want power. All people want power and influence, but no one wants to be subjugated. These ideals are incompatible, resulting in any rational person giving up on a desire for power and influence in hopes of peace and prosperity. When a ruler does not experience repercussions after an anti-empathetic or inhumane action, they see it as a chance to grow their power. The people, hoping for a peaceful resolution, tend to submit. All governments inherently tend towards oppression due to this fact. All rulers captivated by a lack of empathy and a desire for power will become oppressive. It is only when enough oppressed people believe revolution will turn out better for them and their family will they take up arms. Since governments tend towards a gradually more oppressive form, the people will always revolt. There will always be more revolutions. Neoliberal governments attempt to mitigate this through so-called democracy, but due to an inherently oppressed majority class, this will also eventually fail. To prevent continual war and oppression, all governments and class systems must fall. Humans have organized through governments and classes for thousands of years, and the result has never changed. Promising new government, gradually more inhumane and powerful government, oppression, revolution. After thousands of years, it has ended the same every single time. For thousands of years our ancestors have just switched systems, how about we be the first to end the system?